Hello and welcome to today's webinar hosted by ourselves, Salary Finance. First off, thank you so much for signing up today. I hope you get loads out of the session. In case you and I haven't met before, my name's Ted. I work here in the marketing team at Salary Finance, and I'm joined here today by the absolutely incredible Beverly Banahini. I hope I've pronounced your name right as well.
You have.
Excellent.
Well done.
Beverly, would you mind introducing yourself?
So yeah, my name's Bev, and I am talking about my favourite topic today, which is communications, and I'm the Senior Employee Communications Manager at Salary Finance. And I have worked in communications now for 10 years in marketing, PR, and my favourite, which is internal communications. I've worked with loads of different organisations to help with change communications, communicating the employee value proposition, communicating benefits, communicating products. And so I'm really excited today to talk about this topic because I've got so much to share.
Incredibly excited to have you here.
So tell us about yourself.
Well, I was going to say, so the bit of my background I've been working in HR tech now for about 5 or 6 years, particularly around things like company culture, communications, benefits, reward recognition, really broad sort of stuff. But captured within that, always how communicating and benefits always seem to be things that came up. So when we were starting to talk about doing this webinar, the conversations that you and I had, I was really, really excited because I think we've got some really valuable insights to share with everyone today. Also, a few bits of housekeeping though as we kick things up. First off, we will be using Slido today. So for those of you who have a phone at home, which hopefully is many of you, because otherwise I can't imagine a world without my phone, we will be able to, we'll be doing a few short polls. So you'll be able to scan this QR code, or you can enter this number here, 6736849. And our amazing behind the scenes technician, Liam, will be sharing that in the chat somewhere, so you guys can get access to that. Feel free to join in though. We'd love to hear about your opinions, your thoughts, what's going on in your world. We've got a couple of polls and also a Q&A at the end. So if you've got any burning questions for myself or Beverly around communications, benefits, or how the two things can merge together, we'll be able to go into that at the end. Also, immediately after this, we'll be sending out a ton of information as well, but I'll cover more of that at the end, perhaps. It's maybe a little teaser for later on.
Absolutely. So let's get stuck in.
Let's get into it.
What we're here to talk about today, which is communication. So, poll for everyone on the call right now. How happy are you with your current comms plan? Right. Give you a couple of seconds to vote. If
we go through to the next slide, we've got gives you a few options here, so like how happy you are. But Bev, while we're waiting for the answers to come in, quick thought about why do you think it's so difficult to communicate benefits? Because obviously comms is just complicated anyway at the best of time. Why do you think benefits are so challenging?
I think the challenge is just the noise. There is such a huge volume on our time in terms of the amount of content that we have to consume as consumers. We've got stuff from social media, and then obviously at work there's a lot of noise as well. You're focused on what you need to deliver as part of your role, and so sometimes it feels like employee benefits is just another thing to read, and is it super necessary? So I think that is probably the reason why it's about figuring out how you can cut through the noise, because employee benefits is the one thing that is actually for your employee. Everything else that they get in terms of communications is instructions around what they need to do and where they need to be and how they need to do things, whereas the benefit is just for them. It's something that is for them, and it's important that they hear about it.
Totally, and I think it can get so caught up in those sort of operational messages, if you like, the BAU of just being at work, that it's very easy to think, oh, I'll sort that out later, and actually it's very important that these things come up, and you're absolutely right, employers want you to have them, they want you to do them, but communicating them is very, very difficult. Let's see what people at home are saying. So, it seems to be a pretty even split, like most people though being relatively either happy or unhappy. No one is very happy or very unhappy, which is great to hear.
Good.
I mean, I'd rather lots of people were very happy. But obviously we know comms plans, they really vary, particularly over the last few years. You know, the advice everyone's given has been over-communicate.
Yeah.
But realistically, Beverly, if we go to the next slide, if we're at the big question in everyone's mind, what does a good comms plan even look like?
I think a good comms plan, and actually just to speak to the poll there, I think it's very normal to feel like you're not super happy with your comms plan because you have to be reactive. It's important as communicators to have a strategy, so you have stuff that are planned out throughout the year and be proactive about the key messages that you're going to share with your people. But you also want to have that fluidity in your comms plan to flex, because life is happening, things are happening. In March 2020, we had to throw all of our plans in the bin and come up with things that were going to help people because of the coronavirus. And it's the same thing with the cost of living now. So to me, what makes a really good comms plan, what a good comms plan looks like, should I say, is something that leads with empathy. So it's super important when you're communicating with employees to make sure that you're giving them an opportunity to speak. So you want different levels of communication. You have your broadcast, you have dialogue and conversational communications, and you also want opportunity for feedback as well, or user-generated content. So we want to be able to hear what our people think. We want to, when we put communications out there, we want to be able to test the reaction. We want to know what our people are saying. So it's really important to make sure that you have that open loop. It's also super important to get to the point. No nonsense, no jargon, which we're all kind of guilty
so
of doing.
guilty of, absolutely.
Sometimes I make myself sick with the jargon that I say.
I've even said BAU today. I mean,
speak.
goodness.
Exactly, acronyms. It can be really frustrating, and if you just, we don't have a lot of time, so just to get to the point, make the language super simple. Most brands have a tone of voice, so make sure you're speaking in the correct tone as well, and it's fitting for the message. It's also super important to make sure that your communications are inclusive of your whole organisation. So making sure that, the workforce is disparate. You've got people who are office-based, you've got field-based people, you've got people who may be on your retail stores. You need to think about how are you going to get this message across to 100% of the population and 100% of the audience. And some of the ways that you can do that, and this is also really important in a comms plan, is to think about the different mediums. So you need to think about how you're going to communicate, and having stuff for written communications, having stuff for video, having audio. We like to communicate and we like to consume content in different ways. So for me, I'm a big fan of video. I love podcasts. I love reading too. I love all communications. So actually, if you're communicating to me, I want to hear comms in different ways. And also, it depends on the topic. I might not want to listen to a podcast on natural history, but I'd rather watch a documentary on that.
Got you.
But then a podcast, maybe that would be more conversational. So thinking about the medium based on the topic is super important as well. And I think that's it. I think I've covered everything.
I think you've hit some really important pieces there, though, particularly if we think about, there's different strokes for different folks, right? And it's even different things for different times of day. There's no one way that is just going to unlock it all for you. And I think particularly when you think about the amount of noise that these comms have to cut through, I can see why benefits gets pushed down all the way, right?
Exactly.
There's so many more things we're worried about, whether we should be, we're out of COVID now, but we're worried about how to communicate around that, the going back to work, hybrid working, all of those sorts of things. There's so many pieces of information that are important just to us going to the office, let alone how to do my job, what my relationships are like, all of those sorts of things. It's all information coming through. And actually, but this stuff, this critical piece about our benefits and how they can benefit the employee and how they can save people money and whatever the fun of spin you want to put on it, cutting through that noise is so difficult and so important to do. I think that leads us on to our next poll, I believe, though.
Yes, we're ready for our next poll.
So then, when we think then about benefits more widely, this is something that seems to be coming up more and more in conversations I'm having with people. Do you think that benefits are set? Do you think your current benefits are set up to support the cost of living squeeze? So right now, obviously, if we go onto the poll, actually, that'd be great. Right now is a very, very difficult time for many people, and benefits can feel like a little bit detached from that. So I'm curious to people at home, if you think your benefits are set up currently for the cost of living squeeze. So are we supporting people at home? Yes, no, or maybe not sure?
It's a no.
Great start. And benefits can be really broad. And I think while I'm waiting for these kind of answers to come in, we were having a chat before actually about what we mean by financial well-being. Obviously, salary finance, we specialise in that. But there are lots of different ways I think that financial well-being can be approached and the way we think about them in terms of our benefits offering. For example, an employee discount scheme is a really obvious one to me. That's literally designed to save people money. So the idea being, I go to a till, I go to buy my Tesco shop, I can save £5% on all my groceries by using a reloadable card. Sounds like a really, really good thing. And it's a no-brainer to use it, especially if you live close to one or you're already shopping in those places. The challenges come though, in my experience, with low take-up. So most employers find it very difficult for employees to actually get on board with them. And the ones that do can have a really mixed experience of the process. So whether it is to do with reloading the card itself, actually remembering to take the damn thing, could be a UX problem at the till. So was it easy to redeem? Was there something a little bit fiddly or technical? All of those things are sort of barriers to employees actually getting access to those things. And that can absolutely be solved by comms, which is the exact purpose of today for me. It was actually how can we reframe those things. And there are lots and lots of benefits that you guys will already have at home. And looking at this as well, seems to be a pretty even split. Very few people, in fact, no one has said yes. I think we're currently set up to support the cost of living squeeze. So hopefully this will be really helpful for you. But there's loads of different benefits that you will already have that can easily be framed as financial well-being. So medical assistance or dental or a cash plan, something like that. Even an employee reward scheme. So like peer-to-peer recognition and reward that has a monetary attachment, something like Amazon vouchers, Currys vouchers, or something agnostic on a benefits platform. All of those things are cash in people's hands beyond it just being like, oh, what can we do about financial education? What can we do about salary advance? All of those like financial well-being products. There's so many other things that you will already have in place that can benefit you. It's just about communicating them from where we say anyway, that can help people.
I think also with the cost of living, we have to acknowledge that it's an unprecedented time. Like we've never had so much coming up to us all at the same time and causing this like perfect storm that has just caused us all to kind of struggle with our finances. So it makes sense that maybe we're not necessarily thinking in that way in terms of how these benefits can support with the cost of living squeeze, but it's the key is communicating that, understanding how it works and how people can save money, because that's one thing you can try and control. Even though costs are going up, what are the little changes or what are the little things you can tap into to make an impact?
Absolutely. If it's on your TRS, you can probably do something with it. So that's one thing to think about. So then I guess then without further ado, we get into the real meat of this today. What are some of the tips that we're actually, how can we help people?
Sorry.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. This is a new bit of technology. It's very exciting. But then as we go on, the top 5 tips. We're
missing a slide.
What were we missing?
The question was, what's in it for me when you're thinking about your benefits?
Is that not one of the tips?
No, it was one of the questions.
Oh.
Yeah, and for some reason this slide is blank. I don't know where the text has gone. Is it? Technical problems.
It was always going to be something.
They come one by one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scroll through. So if you go next. Bang
There you
it.
go.
Okay, right. So as we get into the actual, as I mentioned, the meat of the, it's all right. It's one of them days. The top 5 tips that we thought about. So if we start with number 1, actually, the first one we thought about today was, there we go. Find your internal influences. We got there in the end. Bev, what do we mean by this?
So every organisation has internal influences, and I'm sure people are thinking, you know, or immediately they'll come to your mind when I say internal influencers. These are the key people who are just advocates for your brand. They naturally communicate what's going on across the business. They're highly trusted, and it's really important to identify those people and include them as part of your communications plan, because as well as, you know, digital channels, print channels, it's also important to think about peer-to-peer channels as well as your comms plan. Are these your financial well-being benefits ambassadors? Who are your people that people just naturally going to go to? A lot of the time when you think about the communications that you receive, one of the really key ones is maybe from your manager or from a mental health first aider or somebody who sits as part of a ambassador program within your organisation. Identify who they are and try and use them as a channel.
Absolutely. It was something in my previous world when we talked about comms and culture. Finding your influencers was absolutely critical. It was, and everyone at home, you'll already know who lots of these people are. You'll be very familiar with them. You might not call them influencers at the moment. They're the people who are out there advocating for some of the great things you do. So they could be mental health first aiders. They could be people who are using your benefits and actively are telling people about it. They could be people who are in management or leadership positions who are like championing the fact that you're a great employer. But anyone who's like out, there could be someone who's just writing stuff on LinkedIn, trying to help people, trying to help with that talent attraction piece that we know is so critical at the moment. It could be any of those things, but these are people who are already doing great work for your brand. What we really need to do is enable them, give them the tools, help them out, even if it's just permission or encouragement to actually go about saying this is good and this can help people. And the other side of it as well is it comes from that lived human experience. I feel that, and we were talking before like about this sort of top-down comms, well, yes, it's kind of functional, it needs to work. Actually, to be able to trust it, like there's the trust barometer stuff you could look at, but hearing it from another human being who has lived the experience, who has gone through and actually like redeemed the cash card or gone out and used the reloadable card and says actually it wasn't that bad and it was all good, that's going to be a far bigger change in someone's actual behavior and how they interact with your benefits over another newsletter, or like even a video, as great as they can be, still feels a little bit detached from my own experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know that word of mouth is one of the strongest kind of marketing tools, and this is what this is. This is word of mouth, and hearing it from a person like you just said, it has more authenticity and then it's higher trust as well.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So top tip number 2, answer the question, what is in it for me? Bev, what is in it for me?
So I think this is really important in terms of how you frame your communications. This is the hook. Like we said, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot going on. We need to get to the point as quick as possible in our communications and help the employees to understand why this is really important to use and how it's going to impact them. And there's going to be different what's in it for me for different benefits and for different people. So for example, childcare vouchers, for people who don't have children, obviously it's not super relevant, but for somebody who can you redeem those kind of benefits, it's going to be super poignant for them. So it's important to make sure that you get to the point, like how is this going to help you? What is the tangible kind of reward for kind of redeeming this benefit, and making sure that we communicate that as quickly as possible.
Right, because a lot of I think the comms we get from work is about what's in it for work rather than what's in it for me. So particularly if you think about like operational things, we're doing a big data cleanse at the moment, which I'm sure everyone at home can really get behind. But there's not. It's very difficult to frame like what's in it for the individual. But that's I think actually we're doing a good job. It's about helping us help our customers better.
Yeah.
It's about how we can work more efficiently and more effectively, and how we can really lean into this like operational excellence idea that we've got. So like framing it about how it is for me, and equally like thinking about hybrid working and the return to the office piece. I saw so much last year about businesses talking about, oh, we want to encourage those water cooler moments, and like creativity and productivity are down because we're not spending enough time with our teams. Well, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. What's in it for me as the employee to come back to the office? Why should I come back? And that's I think why we're seeing loads more like I know free food and explaining like what are the benefits and perks of coming to the office. People are really investing in the like making the office experience something that's really meaningful. I know it's what we're doing here at the moment at Salary Finance. It's very important. We're doing this big office redesign, as you know, but to encourage not just like to come to the office, but what do we do when we're here? How do we work? What are the types of activities that we now do? It's a very different place.
Yeah.
And without being able to answer that question of what's in it for the employee, there's absolutely no hook. You're absolutely right.
And I think the step before that as well is just asking the employee, for example, for this return to work scheme, ask them, why do you enjoy coming to the office? What is it about the office that you like? And then kind of anchoring your communications on there, because sometimes we might think we know what the benefit is, but it might be completely different when you actually ask the employee. So it's really important to ask.
Because it's not just so take a discount scheme. What's in it for the employee? Sure, it could be you save £200 a year. It's one way of looking at it, but actually it's easy. It's going to make your life easy. It's going to make managing your finances easier, and maybe another way of looking at it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Sweet. We are firing through these. Let's go on to question top tip number 3. Ooh. Oh, spoilers. No, keep it relevant and timely. What do we mean by that?
I think it's really important to make sure that you are always communicating your benefits. We have, turnaround is a huge thing at the moment with people leaving and joining. So it's important to make sure that you're always communicating, and like we talked about, over communicating as well, and making sure that you're communicating at the right time. So it's really important to make sure that the comms are relevant, people are getting it at the right time, people are understanding what's in it for them, and making sure that you communicate that through your messages.
Yeah, and again, this comes back to the comms plan piece and having like something really robust under there that can be flexible and changeable, but ultimately like we understand it. So we were thinking about benefits windows. If you've got your flexible benefits windows only open for a certain period of time, communicating about it like just as the window opens while the 2-week window stays open maybe is a bit late, because it doesn't give people really enough opportunity to understand what's in it. That can feel like a real barrier. Oh, I've got to go and work out how does it work, how do I redeem it, how do I allocate stuff X, Y, and Z. Really, really complicated, and it just feels difficult. In the run-up to that, instead, explain, this is what your flexible benefits window looks like. These are going to be your options. Here's a PDF, here's a video. And as you get to day one, it's not about learning. Day one isn't about working it out. Day one is the doing. You have a fixed window to do it. Just being being clear about those timely comms and wrapping them into some kind of plan on the way in and also the way out. Hey, you've missed this one, but actually the next one's going to be here. Your next opportunity to do this here. Here's some more information. Continue that signposting piece.
Yeah, and I think also when it comes to cadence as well, there are those key kind of content pillars that are going to happen every year. For example, Mental Health Awareness Week.
Right.
You should always wrap these kind of key events within the business to kind of use that as an opportunity to talk about your benefits. Christmas time, people are going to be spending a lot of money. How can they save? Look at your benefits package. Like we talked about mental health, there's certain kind of key kind of points within the year that you could probably double up on and probably have a communications plan already around them. How can you incorporate the benefits at those moments? Is really a good opportunity.
I mean, a good example actually is the cost of living crisis itself. I know you've been doing a ton of work with our customers, supporting them through this, providing some amazing content for them, but it's not just about it's both relevant and timely, I suppose, but actually we've really thought about this, what's in it for me, and how can we do those moments right now?
Yeah, and we talked about the comms plan and being happy with your comms plan and the fact that, you need to have that really good balance of having proactive, strategic communication plans, but then having enough time and fluidity in your plan to be able to flex, to react to what's happening in the current environment, whether that's COVID, cost of living, who knows what's going to happen by the end of the year. That is going to be like the key big disaster.
I don't even want to think about it.
In the world, but we need space to be able to do that and be able to react to that so that we can support our employees, and that's what it's all about.
Amazing. Perfect. Number 4 then, practice what you preach. This is a sentence I've heard uttered throughout my life.
Yeah, it's
a
life philosophy, isn't it? You should always practice what you preach, but it's super important for communicating. As the communicator for your business, you are entitled to the benefits, so why not take them out? Go on that customer journey, understand what it is to access the information and take out a benefit, so that when you are creating content for it, you're talking from a first-hand experience. It's so important to familiarize yourself with the product. And this is not the hardest thing to do. It's benefit, it's discount.
You should want it, right?
You should want it. It should be, if you've got a good benefits package, this is quite a great task to have. So yeah, I think like we talked about the influencers having that authenticity and that trust, this is the same thing for you to create really robust comms and be able to do all of points 1 to 4. You need to actually try those benefits out, figure out how it works, go on that customer journey for yourself. And you might identify things that you think, oh, that doesn't make sense, or oh, I didn't know that. And you have different points and different angles to come from when you're creating your community.
So like at a micro level, it could be even about problem solving. So how do I redeem this card at this checkout?
Exactly.
But it could be at a macro level even. How do we even, why would I even want to do that? What are the actual benefits for me? What was the process like? Do we want to renew this with this benefit provider? Do we want to think about doing something different? You may find that throughout that experience of actually living and using these pieces, not only are you building more trust and authenticity in your comms because you understand it and the nuance behind it, but you may also uncover that actually maybe we need to look at things slightly differently. Maybe we need to look at our entire benefit strategy with a slightly new lens on, because actually this thing we thought that was going to be great isn't so great. Or maybe the thing we thought wasn't so great actually is, and we just need to reframe how we communicate it.
Absolutely.
Amazing. On to the last top tip though, embrace feedback and criticism. Again, probably a life philosophy I could use living, but I could live by a bit harder. But Bev, what do we mean by that?
We're always going to, like I said, with what makes a good comms plan is creating those moments for an open loop of communications. So in your plan, think about how are you going to find out whether people like the benefit, people have the awareness. That's all around getting feedback. It's important to kind of understand what's working, what's not working. That insight is super helpful to your comms plan, and then tweak things based on the feedback. So we're human, we all get things wrong sometimes. And it's not about getting things wrong, it's just about understanding what's working and what isn't working, and tweaking your plan based on that. So, what were our assumptions when we came into creating this comms plan? What's been proven to be true and what's been proven to be not so true? And how can we adjust our comms accordingly?
You hit something really important there for me, which is the difference between opinion and fact.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of the feedback you'll get is opinion.
Yeah.
Very, very easy to hear that as fact. This was bad, this was wrong, this didn't work, I didn't like it. Take something like a gym discounts as an example. If you've got like a gym scheme or something like that, you might find a lot of people don't like it because actually they're like, I don't use the gym, I'm not interested, it's too far away from me. fine, that's great, but actually look at the data. What was the take up? How many people did use it?
Yeah.
Was it effective? Do we think it actually helped? Do we think it had a net positive result on our employees, whether it's from physical well-being, mental well-being, financial well-being? Has it actually worked like mathematically? So like you've got to sort of separate that side of it. But the other thing that I was thinking about for this in particular, feedback and criticism, it sucks. I think it really hurts when someone says, I didn't like this was bad. And it's very difficult to detach that, like the sort of human component from that. But I think a way that really helped me, and if it helps you at home, I hope so, instead of thinking about it as good or bad, was it effective? Was it ineffective? And I found that's a much more useful measure of like, first of all, we're doing the right things. Yeah. Have I effectively communicated the thing? Did we achieve our goals? Did we set out the thing that we were trying to do? Did we accomplish it? Yes or no? Was it effective? Is a much better measure of this criticism. If all you're hearing is, I didn't like it, the colour was wrong, the tone of voice, maybe the tone of voice is a slightly different thing, but just listen to what they're saying and try and hear outside of the emotive, like you did a bad job, to, okay, was it effective or not? No. Okay, how can I make it more effective? How can I iterate upon this and learn, and actually on the next piece of comms that we do, make it really, really effective, make it reach that audience and do the things it needs to do?
I think you really touched on an amazing point there when you talked about fact and opinion. And I think the opinions that are really key when I'm looking at feedback is around how it made people feel and how it's helped. So you've got stuff that's subjective, like, you know, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, which is kind of like subjective. You can't group everyone into that. But understanding how this made people feel, or how it's impacted their life, like you said, is really important. And that's the feedback that we want to use for our comms in the future, and to kind of tweak what we do and how we move forward with our strategy. It's also really important when you are asking for feedback and criticism to have space in your plan to actually action it. So, you know, you do not want to ask people what they think unless you're ready to do something about it, because that's just not a good plan in life, just in general. You know, you've got to have enough space in your comms plan to have constant feedback, be checking in, finding out if things are working, and then have the opportunity and the space to change things if you need to.
Totally, couldn't agree with you more. Well, we've flown through that, and we're actually coming nearly to the end. However, this feels like a perfect moment to maybe open up to some questions from the audience members. If we have any questions from some wonderful people at home, let's see what we got. There we go. Oh.
What is happening?
Oh. There we go. Okay, so we do have a question in. Shift workers don't to check their emails often. Don't want to check their emails often? What else can we do, I think, is what the question is. How can we, okay, let's reframe that. How can shift workers don't want to check their emails? How else can we communicate with our shift workers?
It's really important. This is a huge problem across the board when you've got field-based staff. And I think sometimes it's structural. So what kind of systems do you have in place? If you don't have anything that within your communication channels that is actually going to be able to communicate to all of your employees, because you might have 30% of your employees on email, or you maybe have 100%, but because of the job that people have, they're not able to consistently check their emails, or they don't have a necessity to. How do they communicate? So if you've got shift workers, they are communicating with people are communicating with those staff. They need to know when they're starting work. They need to know when they get paid. These are the information. How are those communications getting to them? What channels are being used to get to them? And then just piggyback off of that, because that's how they like to receive information. If they don't need to use email, so an office-based person needs to use their email because that's a core part of their role. But if you are a shift worker and you're maybe more field-based, or you're an engineer, you don't need to check emails. There's no requirement there. Do they have WhatsApp groups that everyone uses? Find out what the channels are that work for them. And rather than tell them, read your emails, because they're not going to do that, so you're on an uphill battle with that.
Well, it's funny to even say that, you're telling them, you're using comms to tell them to go and read the comms.
Exactly.
Which sort of seems like a bit of a wasted effort.
Exactly. So, find out, meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Meet them where they are.
I did a really big project with a large retailer on a very similar line. They weren't allowed their phones on shift. So we were like, well, how can we get critical information to people about whether it was benefits their job, recognition, whatever it was, right? And the way we went about doing that was giving them an app that actually, more like a social media feed. So instead of it feeling like corporate and hard, so something like Teams, which they were a bit averse to, actually something that was a bit softer, meant they were able to like, yeah, sure, they were sharing pictures of their cat and dog and like all that stuff, but actually operationally people were like, okay, this is your shift this week, we've got this embedded in here, this is where you need to be, this is a change to procedures, policies and safety pieces that you actually need to be aware of. And it still went to everyone's emails, but by giving them this new channel that actually was a bit more friendly, and it meant they could get it when they're on the bus, when they're at home, when they're doing cooking their dinner, whatever it was. It meant all the messaging got out easy. When we started doing surveys on the difference between it, it was just night and day. They went from someone a team that felt very under-communicated to all of a sudden people who felt really in the loop.
Yeah, and the way you communicate and the way you receive communication is very unique to you. So, you know, if I do not enjoy listening to a podcast, you could put the secrets of life in that podcast, I still won't listen to it.
Yeah.
So you need to find a way to communicate, and that's our responsibility as communicators, is to find a way to communicate with people in a way that is natural to them.
Which is interesting. The second question we've got here is, how is it best to communicate with offshore workers? Now, I actually haven't got any experience with this. I wonder if you have.
So yeah, with offshore workers, that's also really difficult as well. But like I said, it's the same, actually, it's quite the same across the board, is find out how they do communicate with each other. There are going to be ways, there are going to be these internal influencers who will know, you know, who are those key people that they listen to. And that's why it's so important to have a mix of communications. Because even though you might have the majority of people who maybe like to use WhatsApp to communicate, some people maybe do use their email. So you shouldn't just restrict communications to that, because even within a group of people, for example, offshore workers, maybe they do communicate, they've got their own WhatsApp group that they've set up. You need to do some exploratory work there and find out how they're communicating, but still having different mediums as well to communicate to them.
That's really solid advice. How can we reach and engage different workers from all backgrounds, which is what we're talking about, right? Keeping everyone in. So let's maybe think about some practical tips around that. So like if let's say you've got your line managers, right? You know that's one communications channel. What are some of the other things, if we're thinking more broadly about wider workers, what are some of the other channels people can think about?
So sorry, say that again.
So if you've got offshore workers or any kind of field-based workers, what are some of the active channels you would recommend using?
So one of the things I did was, when in a previous role, is do that exploratory work to find out what do they do. So for example, I worked with engineers, and they were in the van for the majority of their shift, and they had a radio in there. So we were like, why don't we create a podcast or a radio show for them? So what we would do is create really simple playlist, and we would put some key messages in there as part of our communication. So like almost like mini adverts. And it was not long, because obviously long form content like a podcast wouldn't work, but small audio clips that were punchy just to tell them what's going on in the business, because we tried so many different things and we weren't able to penetrate with that. And actually with the playlist, it was available to all employees, but it was only really being used by the engineers because it worked for them, it worked for their role. So like I said, I think it's important to do that exploratory work. There's no one size fits all. Teams are different, they're set up in different ways. What is going to make it easy for them to get that information? What can you just kind of slide your comms into that they already have? And do that.
So maybe that's the advice, instead of over communicate, is like you just try different channels. That's something I would never have thought about, like using a radio to actually broadcast like an advert style thing too. But I think that's absolutely fascinating. Right, we've got time. I think we've got time for one more question. How do you broach sensitive topics, particularly around money, cost of living, with a mind on confidentiality, but also with an openness and willingness to help?
So that's
what a question.
Good question. And like, I think that sensitivity is definitely, when it comes to sensitivity, it's really important. Tone is super important. Like I said, mediums are super important as well. So like maybe reading an email that is like that during your work time is not necessarily the best place to do that if it's a sensitive topic. But like I said, some people maybe would appreciate having an email like that as well. You need to have multiple touch points. So having, when it comes to topics of money, there are a lot of there's a lot of stigma around people struggling with their money. We are pretty much, most of us are in the same boat. We're all struggling. A lot of us do have debt. And it's actually really hard to talk about that just outside of work with your friends. A lot of the time, even with our friends, we don't like to talk about money. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there to creating an environment. What is your company culture like? Have you created an environment where people can feel that they are safe to have those conversations and safe to consume that information without being judged.
Yeah.
So there may be some work that you need to do there as part of your comms plan to set a foundation where people are able to feel comfortable to talk about these sensitive topics.
It's not just about the copy, right? It's actually
Exactly.
about the world in which the copy exists.
Exactly.
What can we do about that? And we were talking this morning, myself and Liam actually, about businesses. So I think a lot of employees and I think a lot of employers are scared at the moment to talk about this stuff because the feedback they'll get from their employees is pay me more.
Yeah.
And we know, we've done tons of research on this. It's not just about salary in, like there's so much more to it around financial wellness. You can, sure, you could increase, if you're making tons of money and you want to give everyone a 5% pay rise, kudos to you. And that's amazing that you get the opportunity to do that. But is it going to solve everyone's financial well-being problems? No.
Yeah.
I think this is the thing to unlock within it. There's so much more to it than just what goes in and what comes out from a salary perspective. People make their own decisions. People have their own lives and they've got their own dependencies and there are things they can't control. The salary alone isn't just the solution to it. It's got to be around things like education. So like how do we actually enable people to learn about this stuff? How do we enable people to even talk about it openly?
Yeah.
I know Mental Health Awareness Week here was really, really special for us. I think with the conversations we had and some of the programs we ran have just been amazing. And hearing people talk so openly about mental health after the fact has been amazing. And I feel like the same sort of journey is on with financial well-being at the moment. Like how do we talk about those things openly and how can we actually have a business communicate with us in a way that isn't just us going, use your benefits more.
Yeah.
Because it isn't like that.
I think that there also needs to, especially with the cost of living, there needs to be an acknowledgement as a business to your employees. We know you're struggling. Like you need to take this. It's so important to say that. Just that in itself is enough. And then from there you can build your communications off of the back of that. That acknowledgement that we know you're struggling and we're limited with the things that we can do. That transparency could be so powerful. At the end of the day, with the cost of living, we can only tell people to save money and don't spend as much as you can. This is a structural problem. This is to do with government intervention needs to happen. But obviously, there are some things that you can do to turn your situation around. This isn't the time where you bury your head in the sand and pretend like nothing's happening and just let your debts pile up.
Inaction is the worst thing you can do.
Exactly. So what can you do? We know that the situation is bad, but what can you do? What can you control? Try and find those spaces. So try and communicate that with your employees as well. We get that staff are always going to ask for more money. Fine. Let's park that to the side for now. You can work on that. There are some things you can do.
That's
to try
not a
and do
comms
that,
problem,
but
right? Well, I mean, there is a bit of that, but yeah,
what can you do? What kind of tips can you take? What actions can you take? And it's important to do that. And one of the questions, just really touching on, it was talking about diversity and speaking to different groups of people. I think that how we do that in terms of our communications is making sure that we are understanding our workforce, understanding who those influencers are, because I know that with different work institutions and how the workplace is set up, you have maybe language barriers, you have people who maybe you've got a large community within your workplace who don't speak English. English is not their first language, or that barrier is also there as well. And I know that's a key thing. It's important to work with people within those communities, within that structure, to make sure that you're getting communications to them as well, and being inclusive. And being inclusive also includes diverse people, whether it's the background that you come from or any kind of disabilities. Try and think about that too. Know that you're not communicating to somebody who's like you. You are communicating to thousands of people, and so you need to think about how your communications can be diverse as well.
Couldn't agree with you more. That is a perfect note, I think, to wind up today's webinar. Bev, thank you so much for joining me out here. I think we've got one more. We can skip through. There we go. Thank you so much for watching. This has been fun. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sending you guys, everyone at home, a little bit of content. So we put together a guide of our top 10 tips for communicating your benefits at the moment. We know it's so critical. We'll be sending that to you directly. It's actually early. It's part of a much wider piece that we'll be sending out to many, many people and opening up for a piece of research that we've done around the cost of living. But no spoilers. We'll have to hang on to that for a little bit of a while. Bev, have you got any closing remarks from today?
Just thank you so much for this time. Thank you for joining on your lunch break. It's amazing, and we definitely want to do more of this. So give us your feedback, let us know what the type of topics you want us to cover, and we'll try and kind of facilitate that.
Absolutely. Well,
thank you so much.
Well, we've been Ted and Bev. You guys have been awesome. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Cheers.
Bye.